The Holocaust was a genocide during World War II, in which Nazi Germany, aided by its collaborators, systematically murdered some 6 million European Jews, around two-thirds of the Jewish population of Europe, between 1941 and 1945. Hey guys, I'm here with the World War II timeline. Today we are going to look at the Holocaust, which is considered by many historians to be the deadliest, most inhumane and evil crime against humanity in the history of our planet. Let's get into it. But before we start, if this interests you, and you want to learn more about World War II and other historical events, consider subscribing for more content. Let's start with a little background. Many Jews live in relative peace behind enemy lines in German-occupied countries throughout the war. However, the Nazis' ultimate goal is to eliminate all Jews from Europe. At first, most of the Jews deported to the East are able to survive, working as slave labor. But conditions are horrible. Anti-Semitism, or anti-Jewish sentiment, has unfortunately been around for a long time in European history, and Jews have suffered greatly because of it. Jews are forced to wear yellow stars, are banned from many professions, and are expelled from schools and universities. Many are arrested for minor offenses and sent to concentration camps where they are held without trial. By the end of World War II, only about 3 million would be alive. Many are still deported to the East and murdered. Others are forced to live in hiding, and many are killed by Nazi soldiers during ghetto raids. This is just a small sampling of the atrocities committed by the Nazis. Death marches become common. When the Germans are pushed further and further back, they force Jews to walk behind them rather than transport them by train. Thousands upon thousands die from exhaustion, starvation, and exposure. Those who are still alive are often shot on the march or at the end, when the Germans are pushed into Germany proper. It's a hopeless cause, and the revolt is eventually crushed, but it shows the Nazis that even in the face of certain death, Jews are willing to resist. Jews are no longer registered as people, but as property. They did not have to make difficult decisions. They just carried out the orders of their superiors. Additionally, the Nazis created a culture of fear and intimidation. People were afraid to speak out against the regime, not only because they didn't want to get in trouble, but also because they feared for the safety of their families and friends. What I have said is just a very brief overview of the main events. If you want to learn more, I highly recommend reading some of the classic works on the subject. Over the course of the next 2 years, 90% of the city's 3 million Jews will be murdered by the Nazis. Also, let us know what you think in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. See you next time. The Nazis did not come to power in 1933 and immediately start killing Jews. The Nazis did not just kill Jews because they were in a blind rage. They planned and organized the killings in advance. They created a system for carrying out the genocide, and they followed it to the letter. This is what makes the Holocaust so evil. The Nazis were able to carry out the genocide in such a cold, calculating way. They were able to strip away the humanity of millions of people and treat them like garbage. They built up their power base and support over time. There is no single answer to these questions, but one of the most important is that the Nazis needed a scapegoat. They needed someone to blame for Germany's problems, and they found that scapegoat in the Jews. The Nazis used anti-Semitic propaganda to convince the German people the Jews were to blame for Germany's economic problems, for the loss of World War I, and for a whole host of other ills. Once the Nazis had the support of the people, they were able to do whatever they wanted. They won the trust of the German people and convinced them that Jews were a threat to society. Once they had the support of the people, the Nazis were able to do things that they could not have done otherwise. Several are sentenced to death and others to long prison terms. However, many of the lower-level functionaries who carried out the orders are never caught. Many knew what was happening and did nothing to stop it. Millions of Germans passively supported Hitler and his regime, and therefore indirectly supported the Holocaust. To be fair, there were also many non-Germans who actively participated in the killings. The Romanian, Lithuanian, and Ukrainian national police were especially active in rounding up Jews and deporting them to concentration camps. Of these, 100,000 are able to flee to safety, while the rest are liberated by the Allies. There are many answers to this question, but one of the most important is that the Nazis were able to dehumanize the Jews in their eyes. The Jews were no longer human beings with rights and dignity. They were pests to be eradicated. The Germans issue orders that Jews must be eliminated without pity or mercy. The Einsatzgruppen, special mobile killing squads, follow the German army, and carry out mass shootings of Jews and other undesirables. Within months, hundreds of thousands of Jews are being murdered like this, buried in mass graves. This included 1.5 million who managed to escape to safer areas, mostly in Britain and the United States. So it's a good thing that they escaped, because what happened to those Jews left behind was horrific and evil beyond comprehension. High-ranking Nazi officials meet to coordinate the final solution, the systematic murder of all Jews in German-occupied Europe. The officials are enthusiastic about carrying out Hitler's wishes. They divide up the work among themselves and set goals to be achieved. The Nazis took this hatred to extremes. Jews are taken by train to the east, in cattle cars packed so tightly that many die of starvation and disease during the journey. Those who do survive are taken to one of several infamous death camps, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau in occupied Poland. Here, men, women, and children are separated and their heads are shaved. They are given striped uniforms and are forced to walk through a shower together for the last time. Then they are sorted into two groups. Those deemed fit for work are sent to one side, and the others are taken immediately to gas chambers, disguised as showers. There they are murdered by lethal poison gas. Corpses are then burned in huge furnaces. They believed that Jews were an inferior race who were poisoning the German body politic. Hitler described them as a threat to the racial purity of the German nation and a danger to its future. In his book Mein Kampf, Hitler outlined his beliefs about Jews and his plans for dealing with them. He claimed that Jews controlled the world's banks and media and were responsible for Germany's economic problems. Of course, none of this was true, but it made for a nice scapegoat and propaganda. And he was able to convince millions of Germans that it was in their best interest to exterminate all Jews. In 1933, when Hitler came to power, there were approximately 9 million Jews living in Germany and Austria. Let me give you a brief overview of what happened during the Holocaust. But keep in mind that there are entire books written about this subject. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. This starts World War II. Late 1939, the Germans begin to systematically persecute Jews in areas under their control. Germany invades the Soviet Union. This gives the Germans control of many more Jews, and they quickly began to deport them to concentration camps. Starting in October 1941, things take a turn for the worse. During the winter of 1941, the Germans occupied the Russian city of Leningrad. July 1942, the Wannsee Conference takes place near Berlin. Summer 1942, mass deportations of Jews from German-occupied France begin. Early 1943, the pace of killings slows somewhat, but the suffering of Jews continues. Spring 1943, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising takes place. Jews in the ghetto rise up against the Germans and fight back. 1944, the Germans lose the war. As Allied troops close in on Germany, the Nazis become more desperate and begin to kill Jews more quickly and brutally. May 1945, Germany surrenders to the Allies. By this point, only about 300,000 Jews remain in Germany. The Nuremberg doctors' trial of 1947 brings many of the Nazi leaders to justice for their crimes against humanity. It's important to remember that not all Germans supported the Holocaust. Some people ask how the Nazis were able to get away with all of this. How could anyone participate in such evil? Another reason is that many of the people involved in the Holocaust were simply following orders. It's also important to remember that the Holocaust did not happen overnight. It was the result of decades of anti-Semitic propaganda and violence. What makes the Holocaust especially unique is that it was a genocide that was planned and organized by a government. Many people ask why the Holocaust happened. Why did the Nazis target the Jews? Why did they carry out the genocide? I could go on and on talking about the Holocaust, but there are entire books written about this subject. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe.